Hello, this is Alessandrina with Dexter and Alessandrina. And today I want to talk about the fear of death and facing that fear. And so, in no way is this a light topic or a simple one, and it's such an important one. It's so important because if we're not facing our fear of death, if we're not facing death and accepting death, and that doesn't mean wanting to die, it means simply being okay with the process of dying, which is a process of transition. It's not an end. And that's why so many people are in fear of death, because it feels like an end. And it feels like the unknown, meaning there's very, very few people that are transcendent, that are enlightened, that have the capacity to really perceive that death is an illusion. To truly, not just mentally, to really have had enough experience and enough exploration with the topic and how consciousness essentially goes beyond death. The body dies in some ways, in other ways it's just transmuting, it's just changing form. And there is no death of the consciousness. And so the more conscious we become, the less ego we are attached to and tied to and meshed in. The more conscious we are, the more we realize that there's no end to consciousness. And therefore it can become okay to die. And truly, not just saying that, not just mentally saying, oh yes, I'm okay dying. Really feeling that. And I know it's not a light topic, a simple topic that we're exploring right now. And again, I am exploring it with you because it's so important. And the reason it's so important is that when we're carrying the fear of death within us, not realizing, and it manifests in so many ways, so many different circumstances and situations we experience, and that fear of death gets triggered. And it's really limiting our experience of freedom, of lightness, of well-being, of vibrant health, of harmonious relationships. So when we face the fear of death, and by facing it completely, and that it might take you years to face it completely, or lifetimes, it doesn't matter. If you intend to face the fear of death, what you will realize is that every time that a little piece of that dissolves, that you're more and more alive, that you're more and more present, appreciative, joyful, peaceful, loving, kind, compassionate. And that not facing the fear of death separates you from those qualities, from those energies, from those meaningful experiences that you can have of being free, of being open, of being so present with yourself, with others, with the world, and your heart completely open to all of it. Because if there is no fear of death, because there is no death, not as we imagine it, not what we project onto it, if that is not there, then your heart can completely open. There is absolutely nothing to be afraid of, to reject. to run away from. Everything becomes completely acceptable and accepted in the same moment, and understood for what it is, for the learning that it brings. And so I'm not saying it's easy to face the fear of death, and I'm not saying that I've completely faced my fear of death. I had a very profound experience recently meditating where I was extremely aware of the fear of death and the fact that the next moment I might not breathe again. Of course, not projecting that, not fearing that, simply being so aware that at any moment that could happen. And that's true for everyone, meaning that oftentimes people who are experiencing sickness, illness, they will be in the fear of death so much, imagining that because they're going through this process and they don't understand what's happening to their bodies and they don't feel like they can control it, that means they are going to die. And then they become so focused on that then the life force is not available for the healing, for what would have happened naturally if they accepted and allowed themselves to have the experience they're having with faith, that is just a part of a process. And so we go into those dynamics where we greatly limit ourselves and our experience of life because of fear of death and not facing it. Imagining that we can control that, oh, if we're sick, or we can get better and then we'll live. Or if we're sick, we're going to die. And so, like, fearing the fear of death, projecting that instead of just being open, realizing that we don't choose when it happens, can happen any moment. And having faith that your choices are facilitating a long life, and refining that process if you haven't been making the loving choices that will facilitate and support a long life where you can learn a lot. You can live a long life so that you can enjoy this incarnation and really learn to love more, because this is what we're doing here. We're here to learn to love. And yes, for some it might look like being more abundant, being more courageous, feeling more confident, having a wonderful relationship, being super healthy. Whatever it is for you, however that focus unfolds in your life, what you're doing is you're learning to love unconditionally yourself and others in every moment. And so cherishing that opportunity by choosing to have a long life so that you can have this experience in this body of learning to love more. And so when we face the fear of death, we can love more. We can be more open. And we can learn more. And we can truly enjoy this magical experience that it is to be in a human body, to be incarnate, without feeling victimized by the illusion of death and that we're not in control. Simply choosing this human experience, choosing to learn and choosing to love in every moment, so that you can continue to learn that more and more. Every time you choose love, you're learning to love. And then you can make that choice over and over and over again, regardless of the people, situations, circumstances that arise. And so learning to love doesn't mean just essentially letting anyone do whatever they want. It's not like that. That's not learning to love. Setting boundaries can be learning to love yourself and to love the other person. If they don't have necessarily boundaries that are optimal for all, then it's very useful and it's a loving thing to set the boundary. Even if it doesn't feel good to your child self, it's not going to. So when you face your fear of death, and for instance, you can do, I am my fear of dying. I am my fear that I'm going to die, or I am my fear of death. When you repeat that and you focus on it, what happens is that you now realize that your own psyche created this fear that death is not real. And that, again, that can take many sittings. It takes what it takes for you to realize that death is not real, because you've recorded so many things. Oh, when people die, we don't see them anymore. It's sad. Everyone cries. It's terrible. We lose our relationships. And for people who believe in past lives, you may have realized by going through past life regressions that a lot of the people that you know in this lifetime, you knew in past lifetimes, and you'll probably know in future lifetimes if you choose to continue to learn together and to grow together. So all the things we imagine to be happening when we die, when we transition, they don't happen. So death as we know it doesn't exist. And so if death as we know it doesn't exist, why fear it? It's such an irrational thing to do. It really doesn't make sense to live our lives in the fear of death, in the fear of something that doesn't exist, and to then experience all of the limitations that entails. So I invite you to face your fear of death. Dexter and I have chosen to do that. It's not easy. We're not perfect at it, and we're not always doing it. And we really have this intention to face our fear of death so that we can enjoy life fully and completely, and be more present with each other, and really have an exceptionally loving and caring relationship amongst ourselves and with others, with people that we serve, our clients and people in our family. And that's often very challenging. Family dynamics are the most challenging of all, and that's okay. Very few people have peaceful family dynamics because we have karmas with our family members. So unless we've really worked on many lifetimes on that, and now we have a really good situation with our family, for most people, family dynamics are extremely triggering and challenging. So those family dynamics are the opportunity to face your fear of death and your fear of abandonment, which is really an extension also of the fear of death. Meaning that when you think about being abandoned, if someone back, when we were less, when we were much more codependent, in the sense of interdependent on each other to survive. So at that time, if a person was abandoned by their tribe, for instance, then they would die. So the fear of abandonment is very tied with the fear of death. And so when you face that fear of abandonment and death, then you can meet even your family, or whoever is most triggering to you in your life, whatever most triggering situation, circumstances in your life, you can face it. And you can bring love into it. You can apply the love. As you face the fear, then love is present. And you can experience the energy of love and apply it to the situation and transmute it and evolve it into something very different than what it has been when you feared it, or when you had the fear of death, and therefore it influenced the dynamic of the relationship. I hope this makes sense, and that it's helpful to you, and that it supports you in your process of facing something that is very difficult to face. And we have a lot of different meditations on our website, dexterandalessandrina.com, or our YouTube channel, where you can work with your fears and release your fears and focus on the fear of death, so you can be free of it, and you can really experience yourself in a very different way than you might have your whole life. Sending you lots of love.